Thanks for tuning in to Tapped In. If you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed on the mats, come find your direction in our DFM Coaching BJJ School community. Now, let's get started.
Welcome to Tapped In. My name is David Figueroa-Martinez of DFM Coaching, and today we're going to be discussing everything you want is downstream. It's an interesting concept that I came across listening to a podcast. Everything is listening to a podcast, to be honest with you, or a documentary for me. And the idea being that what's really meant to be or is meant for you will more than likely be downstream. And how I'm equating that to jiu-jitsu is those moments where we fight too hard for something that isn't there. That's us fighting upstream. Those moments when I don't understand that maybe I should pull instead of push instead of pull, that's me fighting upstream. And the idea being that you have to, again, when we're new, we have a technique in mind, a specific thing that we want to do. It might be the only thing we know how to do, or the only thing that we're really good at. And that is the thing we're going to try to focus on. We got away with it a few times. It is our focus right now. And then you run across some people who understand how to negate it, understand how to stop it, and you don't know how to go anywhere else but that. There are times when I play when maybe I'm working on something specific and we're just going to make this shit happen. Don't get me wrong. There are times and places for that. But really what we should be looking for is looking for what is and isn't there. And there's going to be times when we're playing this game and I have to understand that I'm going to burn way too much energy trying to force something opposed to understanding what's actually available. I was teaching a workshop on a passing concept that I learned a year ago. And my focus was trying to get them to understand that when we get into this position, we're going to start to angle our body in a way that makes our opponent have to adjust. And that in doing so, there's only so many places that our opponent can push and keep us at bay at. And when the angle changes enough where they can't keep up with you, there's an empty spot. You have to go to that empty spot. And I think that it stuck with some of them. In the beginning, it was a little rough because it's more conceptual than step-by-step passing concept. But by the end of the class, I felt like many of them started to understand what I was kind of meaning. I even did the drill with them. And I wanted them to feel what I was feeling. So that's kind of what we're getting at. For example, if I want to, let's say I get a cross collar, I'm seated, my opponent's standing over me. If I pull and they understand that the pull is coming, they brace and they put their weight on their heels. Their hips kind of come back a little bit away from me. And I'm unable to pull. If I force this pull, sometimes it leaves me into getting past because I haven't generated the right kind of pull. They understand it's coming. They're able to adjust in their adjustment. They can position their body a certain way so that maybe they just knee cut right through me instead of being collar dragged. The goal should be, once I find that resistance that's obviously there and I'm not going to get the thing that I want, what occurs next? What can I do next? What can I do after that? Instead of forcing this position, I have to understand, all right, their heels are carrying most of their weight. They're leaning back a little bit to compensate, in some ways overcompensate the fact that I'm trying to collar drag. What's available? Ankle pick. They're pulling their weight that way anyway. I have the collar. All I need to do is come back up in proper combat base, snatch the ankle, the heel, and I'm up. And they don't have a response unless I come up too slowly. That's the give and pull that we need to start working with. Those moments where we're pulling one way or pushing one way, and they're bracing and now they're giving you something else. I did a concept on finding the apex of the triangle. We were talking about sweeps and takedowns. Very similar. what I'm looking to do, let's say another example would be, let's say I want to do ankle picks from standing. We're both bent over. I'm making them step towards me, and I pull and I try to grab for that ankle, but he steps back. I can now just yank him. I could come back up and yank him down like I'm trying to shake out a rug, and they go to all fours, their hands hit the mat, and I can start taking the back. I can start attacking the neck. I'm using their response to generate something else, opposed to, let me try to force this. Let me force this out here. Another great example is the Americana. I have a couple of students that I love the Americana. And it's one of the first submissions we kind of learned. It's pretty easy. The thing was, once you start getting the Americana, people either straighten out the arm or they're stronger than you and they hold the arm in place. So I had to start walking some of my white belts through. Okay, if the arm is in place, got him out. He or she is forcing the arm to get really heavy and it's not defending against what's coming next. So got him out. Keep the position, keep the Americana configuration, but just go to mount. And then when we got to mount, they would get there and they would try to force it and they couldn't do anything. And they're doing this to me. And I'm like, so what's next? And sometimes they're lost. Sometimes they let go of the position completely and they start working like a choke or some other thing. I'm like, no, go back. And I have them sit in the position and they're like, I'm lost. And I said, okay, so where does it feel like my arm is going? Because now they're in mount. I might want to pull that arm across from me. I was like, okay. So then they would transition to armbar. So these positions that we get so hung up in, especially early, the defense will often lead you downstream into something just as effective or even better. But we can't get so fixated on the one position. For example, another example, let's say I got triangle on you. Again, not something I do very often. I have short legs. It takes a lot for me to actually triangle somebody. But let's say I have triangle and my opponent buries his arm in the hip. Instead of forcing that arm out completely, and I could, there's things we can do, but downstream is the omoplata. So now we get the omoplata, we roll them through. Maybe they roll on their own. We come up to the top position and his leg or his arm is between our legs. Maybe you apply a little wrist lock there to end it, or wrist lock to bring the other arm in play, and now you start comoring that arm. Everything is downstream. You just need to provide the incentive for them to give you that downstream momentum. Things to consider. All these actions are married to one another. So every submission that you want to go for, that I can think of, has a marrying or a married technique next to it. Let's say you go back take, you have seatbelt. They're really good at blocking the hands. They don't let you get into the choke and you can't get into the collar or whatnot. Then you figure four, Kimura grip the arm. And you transition to armbar. It's downfield, downstream. Let's say we're in mount and they're not giving me the arms and they're pinning them to their body. I go Ezekiel, they bring the arms up. Once the arms come up, I'm taking one or both. If they're not letting you pass in a certain way, typically you can go around. You can cartwheel over. You can force them to give you something else because you can't defend all things at once. So your job is to just to understand when there's a roadblock, I have to look at this like me trying to get home. There's a road closure on such and such freeway. I can't take my normal exit. Or maybe I can't get on the freeway at all. So now I have to take these side streets, but I have to know them well enough to understand that these side streets are going to get me to where I want to go. But I have to understand my game well enough to see any of those. And sometimes that's where maybe a private lesson really comes into play. You and the coach can sit down. What are you really working on? And then he or she can give you a couple of suggestions or options in the positions that you find yourself readily available in. And then you can start understanding that better. Your job is not to force responses or force specific things. Your job is to force something, elicit a response, and then take advantage of whatever that response is. I understand that when you're early, it doesn't make much sense. You're limited on your jiu-jitsu vocabulary, you're limited on your jiu-jitsu technique, and it gets pretty difficult to have an in-depth conversation like this. And I don't mean the one that I'm having, but when you're in a round. So we're having that physical debate. Your vocabulary is limited. But again, that's where more classes or a sit down with someone or a private lesson really goes a long way. Because once you start understanding, I'm going to flow around the things that I need or the things that get in my way. Be like water, in essence. There's a bunch of positions that I play where I might want something very specific. And when I was early in the game, let's say Kimura, I knew Kimura really well. And that was my go-to. But then it got harder and harder to do a Kimura. People got used to me trying to snatch arms. So then other things of my game developed that I could then present to my opponent first, that then led me to the Kimura. Let's say I'm passing knee cut. You pass a knee cut, you get that little underhook, and you go north-south. You already have the underhook. I didn't go for the Kimura first, but the Kimura was a goal. But I got there second. I got there through something else. Because the first attack is really easy to spot, and people can generally start to stop it. But when you start mixing it in behind some of the things you want, then that goal ends up being downstream. I knee cut, I have the underhook, I step over into north-south, I get the Kimura grip. I may not finish the Kimura. They might get really good at defending the Kimura there. And I'm like, okay, so what's my next viable option? So now we go Tariqa Plata, we go power Kimura, maybe we go T Kimura, maybe we go Armbar, which is a huge favorite of mine. Maybe we lock up the arm with the gi top and we start going bread cutter. There's a bunch of shit downstream that you can start doing from there that we can't get focused on that one submission we have. And if we are focused on that submission, let it be shrouded by other attacks and other techniques so they don't see it coming. Put some diversions in the way. Put some things in the way that make them have to deal with those first, and then they kind of give you the thing that you want downstream. This is where you start becoming really tactical. This is where you start to understand the things that I want are only going to come to me or be readily available when my opponent suggests them for me. And you start feeling like a clairvoyant, or you can predict some things. That's how it sort of feels like when I used to roll with brown and black belts when I was younger, or lower in the totem pole, and I'd be like, how does this motherfucker know what I'm going to do? How does he keep getting to the same positions that he wants? How does he keep getting to the triangle? I'm not even in the triangle position here. How am I here? I didn't even think a triangle was possible from this spot. Those things start happening. So start thinking of what's a better option in any given position. And we might be working on some things. We might be working on, for example, when I was working on armbar from mount, downstream was still the armbar, but I started to understand how to untie the arms, how to create pressure, how to make them give me things that I wanted instead of forcing them, how to put up diversions that force them to have to focus on something else instead of the thing that I was really presenting. And then it allowed me to get what I needed to get. Everything you need is going to be downstream. If you have to work too hard for it, there's some other thing that you can do. So don't focus just on what you want to do. Focus on what's available. Hope this makes some sense. If you have any questions about this or anything else, jiu-jitsu related, please hit me up. dfm.2099 on Instagram and Threads. Until next time, thank you so much.